About 15 years ago, my father was involved in a unique project with Professor Mark Nick Leibovitz. Professor Leibovitz, at the end of his life, was working on creating an engine that was powered not by gas, but by centrifugal force. They had a problem. Anytime they wanted to produce a prototype to test out his invention, they had the issue that if they would send the instructions to the manufacturer, then the manufacturer will have their secret and they'll be able to reproduce it on their own, thereby stealing the idea and potentially lots of money and honor. So how could they get the parts without spilling the secret? What they decided to do was to spread the labor amongst multiple manufacturers. So they would produce ball bearings in this factory in China, and they would shape the metal in another factory in China, and that way every manufacturer was working on a different part of it, and they had no idea what they were involved in. Right? So they could be creating the most revolutionary device, but as far as they knew, they were making a bicycle. It was just regular old parts. Their intention in the manufacturing had nothing to do with the final product. All that mattered was the physical results. So that works when you're trying to create an engine. But there are certain projects that this doesn't work for. In the desert, the Jews were charged with an impossible task. Hashem said to them, "Make me a house. Make a place where I, the infinite God, can come down and dwell amongst you." So this is an obvious impossibility. How could the uncontainable, boundless, infinite presence of Hashem come down into a physical structure made of gold and silver and wood? It's impossible. Doesn't make any sense. How could our physical materials house the infinite? So there is a secret here. It's a tremendous tool that's very applicable to our current situation. How do you pack infinity into a little piece of gold? So the key is, it's what lies beneath the surface. You have to create, behind the scenes where nobody sees, before the gold even starts, there has to be this yearning, this boundless feeling of, I want to connect. I want to be involved in something great and vast and greater than myself. And you take that fire, you take that yearning, and then you take your hammer and you bang it in to the piece of gold. You've thereby infused that physical thing with this uncontainable spiritual energy. You've achieved the impossible. You've somehow gotten this gold to hold something that is much greater than the thing itself. That's what the Jews were asked to do when Hashem told them to create the Mishkan. This is an idea that follows through every part of the process. For example, who was the master architect who was in charge of creating the Mishkan? His name was Bezalel. So the sages tell us that Bezalel had 3 ancestors that basically made him possible. Bezalel was a grandchild of Miriam, of Nachshon ben Aminadav, and of Hur. Miriam, she was the midwife in Egypt. When Paro, the king, had commanded the midwives to kill Jewish babies, Miriam put her life on the line, and she said, "No, I won't do it." And she secretly went and helped the Jewish mothers give birth to their children. She risked her life for that important value. Nachshon ben Aminadav, the second ancestor that the sages mentioned. When the Jews were standing at Yam Suf, staring at the water and staring at the Egyptians on the other side of them, they just didn't know what to do. No one wanted to take the first step. It was Nachshon who said, "Listen, God promised. Just walk into the water and it'll be okay." And he himself was the first. He took a step into the water and another step until he was covered until his nose in water, about to die. And then he said, "But Hashem promised He's going to save us." And he took a step further, and then the sea split and the entire Jewish people crossed. You have Miriam, you have Nachshon. The third ancestor was Hur. Hur, when the Jewish people were doing the awful sin of serving the golden calf mistakenly, nobody protested except for one individual in the entire nation. He knew it would fail. There was no way you could stop this. But he says, I have to stand up for what's right. And he ran forward and tried to stop them from doing what they were doing. And sure enough, he was killed. These are the ancestors of Bitzalel. And the sages say that it's because of them and their acts of Mesirut Nefesh, sacrificing their life. It's because of that Bitzalel had the ability to achieve his mission of creating a Mishkan, this physical thing that can house Hashem's presence. What does that mean? So if you think about it, the act of Mesirut Nefesh, sacrificing your life, on the surface it's pretty silly. Okay, you can stand for values and things can be important to you. And you can invest lots of energy and effort into it. But to give up your life, it doesn't really make any sense. Once your life is over, that's it, game over. What have I achieved? I can't play anymore. What's the point of giving up my life? Right? Why would Miriam risk her life to save the babies? How could Nachshon risk drowning himself? How could Hur go and get himself killed? Even if they're doing very important things, what's the point? Now it's over. So obviously, the answer is, when you are watching someone risk their life and give their life for a purpose and for a meaning, what you're seeing in front of you is not the physical scene. If you're willing to give your life up for something, while you're doing it, anybody watching you will see that there's so much more here than this person's physical body. There's so much more than a man walking into the water. What you see in front of you is a window into an infinite world. It's something that lies far beyond this physical world. That's obviously more important. It's more real, more significant than anything that's here amongst us. When someone gives up their life for something, they've revealed that there is a world that's far greater that lies beneath. And that's the key. It was the sacrifice of Miriam, of Nachshon, of Hur. That's what enabled Bitzalel to do something very similar. They took their physical bodies, they took their life and everything that it stands for, and they showed how really there's a much bigger thing underneath the surface. And Bitzalel was charged with exactly that mission. You take all of the gold, all of the silver, all of the wooden pieces that the Jewish people brought, and you infuse spirituality into it. You should use those physical pieces to house a greater world that's uncontainable. This impossible thing happening. But that's exactly the point. It's all about what lies beneath the surface. That's the answer to the question. How do you create a physical thing that can contain something so much more? The answer is there's a much deeper reality that lies beyond anything physical. It's more real and more significant than the things we experience with our senses. And it's that which ought to guide us and fuel our every action. We have to do exactly the opposite of what those factory workers were doing, creating ball bearings and metal without any idea what they were involved in. We have to have consciousness and presence and purpose in every physical action that we do. This is a very relevant message for now, our time. Whether we like it or not, whether we prepared for it or not, all of our lives are changed. This coronavirus, no going to work, no going to school. We've been trapped inside. Basically, we're stuck at home. So what's the message? So everybody has their take on it. But one thing is for sure, is that our focus has been shifted inwards, against our will even. We've been forced to look inwards. Beyond the outer shell of all of our life, those things that we do outside, we're now at home. We're with our family, and really we're with ourselves. And we can try to avoid it for as long as we can, but the message is we have to look inward and develop a fire, develop this inner space which is undetectable. Nobody will ever see it or hear about it. You won't find it on a camera. It's all there underneath the surface. That's what we need to be developing. This inner space where only ourself and God, only our families are a part of. Right? It starts with us and extends to the family, then to the walls of our home. Infuse that with a spiritual light, a fire that burns beneath the surface. And then we can go back out and show the world exactly what life is about. especially now as we're entering Shabbat. You don't have to check the news anymore. You don't have to homeschool your kids to avoid getting it over the head from their teachers. There's nothing else to do. There's just time to sit and reflect and develop this inner yearning, this inner passion. That's the key. That is my thought on the Parsha. And God willing, we should be able to ingrain this message and really, really create that inner space which fuels the rest of reality and bring God's holy light into our world. And along with that will come healing and relief and ultimately the redemption. Shabbat Shalom.